What's going on, guys? Coming back at you again. I got another knife review. As I said in my last video, which was my first video, I'm just now sort of getting back into knives, still trying to regrow my collection from what I used to have previously before many got sold off. So been buying some here and there when I can. If I find something that piques my interest, I may pick it up. As you can see, today I'm going to be reviewing a Benchmade. And as you can see right there, I'm going to be reviewing the Bugout. Not that there aren't 10 million reviews of this knife already. I know everybody knows about it. Everybody has talked about it. I mentioned in the last video, I haven't always been the biggest fan of small knives. I generally prefer a bigger, heavier, chunkier knife. That's just my personal preference. It's nothing against small knives, but everybody raved about this knife, so I just had to jump on to see what all the fuss was about. As you can see here, we have the box that the knife came in. I got this one off BladeHQ. I think it was between 140 and 150, somewhere in there at the time I bought it. I'm pretty sure it's around the same price now. This one I got specifically, as you can see, the product number for this one is 535GRY-1. That is the Ranger Green Bugout with the coated blade. That's just the one I happen to go for. I like the color scheme on it, so that's what I ordered. Let me get this box out of the way. Gotcha, the knife is not in here. I've already used the knife for quite a while, been carrying it. See what I thought about it. So let me get this out of here. And here is the knife. Now, very obviously, as you can see right up front, this Bugout is not Ranger Green. That is because I've already changed the scales on it. These scales are the titanium scales from Flytanium. I really like these scales. I like the way they make the knife look. Another thing you will notice through the video, the pocket clip is not on here. Since I've put these scales on, which was 2 to 3 days ago, I think, I have not carried it. And the screws, because I ordered a new set of screws for the whole knife. For all the body screws and the pocket clip screws, I ordered titanium screws for all of those through Flytanium, but I did not order them the same time I ordered the scales and this thumb stud. This thumb stud is also a titanium thumb stud from Flytanium. Those were two separate orders, placed at two separate times. I ordered the scales first, and they have arrived. I ordered the screws separately. They still have not arrived yet. So I'd already taken the pocket clip off, haven't put it back on, but they will be back shortly. But later on in the video, I will get into why these are on here. Anyway, starting out, this is the Bugout. It's a great little knife. Like I said, this one is the large Bugout. It has a 3.24 inch blade. It's a drop point, flat ground from the swedge. Overall length on it is roughly 3.5 inches, 3.4 something inches, I think, if I remember correctly. I'll just call it 3.5 inches. The blade is S30V. S30V is a good steel, Many years ago when it came out, it was one of the super steels. I still consider it a super steel compared to some things I have carried. S30V does a very good job. It holds a good edge. It takes a good edge. It's reasonably tough. It is corrosion resistant, which is important to me. I don't know if I've ever mentioned it in the video. I live in Alabama. For 70 to 80% of the year, it hovers between 80 and 100 degrees. And always between 90 and 100% humidity. I sweat a lot. It's very hot outside. It's very humid outside. Corrosion resistance is important to me. It's not the end-all be-all of when I purchase a knife, but it is important. So it is good to have a steel, for me anyway, that is semi-corrosion resistant. Like I said, the blade is 3.24 inches long. It's got an overall length of roughly 7.5 inches. The knife, as it comes from Benchmade, weighs 1.85 ounces. That is a very light knife, especially for a knife with a 3 and roughly a 1/4 inch blade. That's not a whole lot of weight. And as you can see, if it will focus, the blade stock is not very thick. That contributes to the lightweightness. I'm not sure. I'd have to get my calipers out, which I do not have on me. I have not measured the blade width. I do not know what it is. Does not look to be very much. That helps contribute to the weight. Another thing you will notice, as I talk about it now, as it comes from the factory, the Bugout has a reversible pocket clip. It can either be right side or left side, tip up only. So no tip down, only tip up. But it is reversible right side to left side. On this model, with the Flytanium scales, if my camera will focus, the scales are only tapped for right side tip up only. Now, Flytanium may have a different model that offers left hand. I'm not sure. But I'm right-handed. I carry my front right pocket. So right hand tip up only is your only option with the Flytanium scales. That's what I went with. That's no issue to me. And again, I also went with the Flytanium titanium thumb stud. I'm sure I'll get tongue-tied on those at some point in this video. Flytanium titanium. Another thing to note about this knife, I've had it for a while. I have not used it extensively. I've got multiple knives that I carry on a daily basis. I rotate knives. I enjoy different knives. I don't generally have one knife that I carry every day. So my knives don't get worn very, very quickly. As a result, this one, the action's good. I'm not saying the action isn't good. It's a typical Benchmade action. The axis lock, it is what it is. It has not broken in yet, though. It's still got just the slightest bit of grittiness to it. And I have oiled this blade before, and it does help. I just need to use it some more. Right in there. At that point, I feel just the slightest bit of grit. And like I said, this knife is dirty. It is full of pocket lint. I have carried it. I have used it, just not extensively. If I were to clean it, I'm sure that would help. But as it stands, it's fine. It's your typical Benchmade action. Axis lock. Deploys smooth. I have a hard time closing it with the axis lock because I don't have the pocket clip on here yet. Normally when I would close an axis lock, this side where the pocket clip would be, I would kind of hook my fingers over it. I can't on this because the pocket clip's not on here. So it is a little difficult for me to close the knife one-handed right now as it sits. It's doable. It still does it fine, but it's just something I've noticed. If a knife doesn't have a pocket clip, especially an axis lock, I have difficulty closing it. Overall, it's a great knife. I'd recommend it. I'm not saying it is the best knife for the money in this price range, not even for this size of knife. I'm not really going to get into competitive options. I think that would best be done on your part, anyone who is looking at purchasing this knife. I do have another knife here beside me that I will show you as a semi-competitive option. Benchmade makes quality products. I've had many Benchmade knives over the years. I've had multiple 940s. This one, I've had Presidios. I've got a bailout. I've got 275 Adamas, folder and fixed blade. I've got the trying to remember what the other fixed blade, Nimravis, is that it? I think. I've got one of those. I have a Griptilian. I may have a Griptilian. I may have sold it. I had a Griptilian. My wife actually has a pink mini Griptilian. That is what she carries on a normal basis. She picked that knife out herself. She really enjoys it. She's been carrying that knife for years. I couldn't tell you how many times I've sharpened that knife for her. She's been carrying it for years. She loves that knife. It's an older, I say older, I'm not sure. It's probably pushing 7 years old. At the time when I bought it, the Griptilians were still coming in 154 cm, if that time dates it for you in any aspect. But that's what my wife carries. Needless to say, I've had many Benchmades, and this one is no exception to Benchmade quality. Everything I would expect from Benchmade is in this knife. There's nothing abnormal or out of the ordinary that would detract from anything I have to say about this knife, except the price. And it's not a knock. It's not that I don't think the knife itself is worth the money. I think it's a great knife. It's just, you know how it is with certain brands. Once they get so big and have your reputation, they can just charge more for a knife. And I think that is applying to the Bugout here. I'm not saying it's overpriced for what it is. I think it's a great knife. You have Benchmade's warranty. It's a good knife made by a good company. But you do pay for that. And I think a lot of that you are paying for the Benchmade name. Now, that is not necessarily a bad thing. There's a reason I own many Benchmade knives. I don't buy them because I don't think they're good knives. Benchmade makes a good product. It's just something to think about. The one criticism I will level at this knife, and it's something I knew going into it, that I had clearly already planned for the way this knife sits now. The handle scales that come on this knife, the FRN handle scales. Give me 1 second. Let me grab the box. I think I put the original scales back in this box. I say I did. I may not have. No, I didn't. I'm sorry. You won't get to see them. But if you just Google the Benchmade Bugout, the plastic scales that come on the knife, FRN, plastic, Zytel, whatever you want to call it. I'll just call them plastic because it's all synthetic polymer material. I just call it plastic. Wrangler Star did a video on the Benchmade Bugout. And although I don't agree with everything he leveled at this knife, he said it felt, don't quote me on this, I'm not 100% sure, it's been a while since I've watched the video, but he said it felt like a flimsy, kind of cheaply made. I remember at one point he said that he could flex his knife like this and that he would be able to snap it in half. Now, I do agree with that. I mean, as it comes from the factory, this is not a hard use knife. This is not a knife that I'm going to take out in the woods and baton with and, you know, split wood and chop down trees. That's not what this knife is intended for. This is intended to be just a good overall EDC knife. And the way it ships from Benchmade with the plastic scales, it excels at that. It is perfect at that. But as I said in my introduction, I do like a knife that has a bit more hard use characteristic to it. That's just my preference. I like a more heavy duty knife. When I received this knife from Benchmade, the plastic scales, they felt cheap. I'm not saying they weren't quality. The machining of the scales was nice. The fit and finish was nice. They just felt cheap. They just had that cheap plasticky sound, that cheap plasticky feel. I do agree with Wrangler Star on that, and I did not like that. I knew they may feel like that. I decided to do it anyway because there are aftermarket options to solve that, as you see here now. Excuse me, I just got through eating dinner. I just didn't like them. So I ordered, I think the same day I received the knife, I think the same day the knife came in the mail, I got on I'm wanting to say I ordered the Flytanium scales that are on here. I'm wanting to say I ordered them from BladeHQ, if I'm not mistaken. BladeHQ has a nice selection of stuff in stock. As I said, these are the titanium scales from Flytanium. They absolutely changed my view on this knife 180 degrees. It was almost like receiving a whole new knife to me. Again, as it comes from the factory, the Bugout will serve just fine in 99% of applications. It was just, the feel did not do it for me. It just didn't feel substantial. The scales felt fairly cheap. I just wasn't a fan. And I like customizing stuff. I like having the option to change things to how I want, yada yada. So I ordered these scales from Flytanium. I'm wanting to say these scales were around $70. Don't quote me on that. These are the titanium ones. They also have them in copper and brass. And I'm sure they have them in a few other patterns as well. Flytanium isn't the only company that makes scales for this knife. There are many other people who make scales for it, both titanium and aluminum. You kind of have your choice. The Benchmade Bugout is a lot like the Spyderco PM2 in that regard. There's just a bunch of aftermarket customization options available for it, which is always a good thing. I decided just to go with Flytaniums. I knew they had a solid reputation. It was a solid company. And they were in stock. Which, the way things are nowadays, a lot can be said for just having something in stock. Ordered these scales, put them on. Got everything put back together. And it just changed the way this knife feels for me. It's the same form factor and everything that the knife comes from the factory. It doesn't change the shape of the handle or anything, the dimensions or anything like that. Everything is still the same, up to and including the lanyard hole on this knife. It's just, this went from a knife to me that just felt flimsy. It didn't ever feel like, in me using the knife, I never felt like I was stressing the knife so much that it may fail. But I did feel, how Wrangler Star said, that if I were to get the knife and just really push it, I felt like I could break the knife in half. With these Flytanium scales, I do not feel that. This knife is solid. It's just, it transformed the whole knife for me. I know this is a video on the Bugout, not Flytanium. This is just a plug. You're welcome, Flytanium. You make a good product. The knife is great. Especially as it sits right now, to me. If you watch my previous video on the Civivi Elementum, you will know I went on a rant about lanyard holes. Not a rant, but I spoke about lanyard holes and how I did not like them. I don't use them. There are reasons I don't use them. But I talked specifically on the Elementum about how I thought it detracted from the appearance of the knife. I didn't like the way it looked on the Elementum. I wasn't crazy about how they went about it. The lanyard hole as it sits right now, where you see it from Flytanium, is the exact same design that it is from Benchmade. So the plastic scales that come from Benchmade, the lanyard hole looks exactly like this. The same shape, the same location, the same size. It's completely the same as it is on this knife. And as it comes on this knife, I do like it. I don't use it. I still don't like lanyards, but I do not think the lanyard hole on this knife detracts from the appearance of the knife. I actually think it looks pretty good. I like the way Benchmade designed it. I'm glad they did it like that instead of just drilling, a hole. I like it, gives it a little flair. I like the way it makes it look. Trying to think what else I have to say about it. It's a great little knife. As it sits right now, this is a $230 knife, $240 knife after the customizations. I think the Bugout, as I bought it, was $140 or $150. these scales were $70, so that puts it at $210, $220. And then the thumb stud was $10, and the screws that I ordered that have not yet come are another $10. So we're looking at $230 or $240 as the knife sits now. And at that price, I greatly enjoy this knife. I will say I would rather pay $220 to $240 for this knife as it sits now than pay $140 or $150 for the knife solely as it comes from Benchmade. They very well might, but if they had a version with G10 scales or micarta scales, that would be my route. I would much prefer that over the plastic scales that come on it. Though that may not be the case. I'm just speaking out of the top of my head. That would be my preference. At that point, I don't see that I would need to change the scales, but I just did not like the scales from Benchmade. They just felt cheap. They had the hollow sound. They were really light. I just didn't like them. And I know the whole point of this knife is to be small and compact and lightweight. I understand that. That's just not my personal preference. And there's a difference between, being lightweight and feeling cheap. Like I said, as the knife comes from Benchmade from the factory, it's 1.85 ounces. Don't quote me on this. I do not have a spec sheet anywhere near me. I'm wanting to say with the addition of these Flytanium scales, it added an ounce, maybe. So as the knife sits right now, I think it weighs around 2.8, 2.9 ounces. So if I can add 1 ounce of weight and make my knife feel 10 times as substantial as it did with these titanium scales, I will take that anytime. I told you I had a competitive option for you, and this is just, I'm not saying that this is a direct competitor. It may be. They're two different price points. From the last video y'all saw, here's the Civivi Elementum. This knife is a little bit smaller than the Bugout. It is definitely cheaper than the Bugout, but I'm just showing this for size comparison. Man, the action on that Elementum is so good. Those bearings are just amazing. Amazing. I'm sorry, small rant. As you can see there, it may not look like it on camera. Those are roughly lined up on the tail end. The Benchmade is just ever so slightly longer. Eyeballing it, I would say 3/8 of an inch longer overall for the Benchmade. Blade length on the two is comparable. If we measure total blade length, the Benchmade is a little bit longer. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. Cutting edge is a little bit closer. I know you probably can't see, but the cutting edge on the Benchmade is probably a 1/4 inch more. Overall, I consider these very comparable knives. To me, in my mind, they both fill the same role. A small, easy to carry EDC knife, general purpose knife. Neither one of them are hard use folders in my opinion. I'm not saying that they couldn't flex into that role if need be, but as they come, I wouldn't consider them hard use folders. There's much, much better choices for that. And again, the Benchmade is in a much different price point than the Civivi. This Civivi is a $50 knife. Now, I think the Civivi is an outstanding knife at that $50 price point. This Benchmade is $150. You could have 3 Elementums for the price of 1 Bugout. And that gets me back to what I was saying about the value of this knife. It's an outstanding knife for what it is. But if someone were to tell me I could have 1 Bugout or my pick of 3 different Elementums, I would probably go with the Elementums just because quantity, honestly. There's not much quality difference in between this Civivi and this Benchmade, in my mind, and in my testing. They perform the same. My focus is terrible tonight. I'm sorry about that. I still do not have a decent camera set up. My biggest takeaway from the Bugout, it's a great knife. It's a great knife, especially with these scales on it, the way it sits now, for me, in my opinion. Get the Civivi out of the way. I just think that there may be better options for your money. I'm not going to call anything out. I'm not knocking on Benchmade at all. I love Benchmade products. That's why, again, I have so many of them. And I've had so many of them. It's a great knife. It's an outstanding knife. It does everything I could ever realistically ask it to do. I'm never going to be splitting wood with this knife. You know, hard to use and get prying with it. For a general EDC knife, this knife is outstanding. And that's really all I have to say about it. If you have any questions on this knife, feel free, shoot me a message, ask me in the comments. I will do, again, I do my best to check comments, messages, anything like that when I have time. But YouTube is just a hobby for me. I work a full-time job, more than a full-time job. I mean, on a normal week, I probably work 80 hours, give or take, mostly give. So I don't have a lot of free time, and when I do, this isn't my first priority, is to make YouTube videos. But yeah, if you have any questions about the knife, feel free to ask. Whatever you need to know, just let me know. Again, guys, if you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate the sub, the like, the thumbs up, whatever the current phrase is. Anyways, if you guys have any questions, just let me know. Thanks.